Well, howdy doody, everybody. Hi, and welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and it's great to be here. I hope everybody's doing well. And it is the 29th of August, 2019, which is really saying something. Dave Big Booty, I don't know what it is, or Dave Big Booty, I should say, but you managed to keep winning the internet every time. I don't know if it was you who put it together, but I saw somewhere during the time we were doing the Apollo 11 thing, it's a sign that said "Keep calm," and what is it again? Keep calm and set SCE to aux to auxiliary. That was the Apollo 12 instruction that kept that mission online. It's set SCE to aux. That's just awesome. So cool stuff. Great to be here. And let me just put the link into the Facebook section because I didn't do that yet. This one really snuck up on me, to be honest with you. I'm just sitting here like, oh my God, look at the time. So how's everybody doing? I hope everyone's doing well. It's good to be here. It's good to be anywhere, really, these days. Sitting about outside with my beautiful wife thinking about that, what the chances of just living in this age, in this country at this time. It's just, when you think about the unlikelihood of it and how just unimaginably fortunate, that all of us are just to be Americans in the 21st century. And we lose track of that sometimes, and sometimes it does us a lot of good to remember that, because it's absolutely astonishing. You think about the conditions that just about everybody else in the history of the world has had to endure, and then we look at our lives, and like I say, people are throwing their soy lattes against the wall because life is a living hell. It's just a little strange. Anyway, as I say, it's good to be here. Looking at the comments live here. We have set a show topic for tonight on the Facebook page, and the show topic is Backstage, behind the scenes. So I'm going to just be taking questions on things either behind the scenes here at BillWhittle.com, or to some degree what I may or may not know about behind the scenes for the entire conservative movement that I'm a part of, or whatever the case may be. I got a little distracted there. Eric saying, pray for us in Florida. My sister and my mom and my two brothers, my two nephews, all of them in Florida. So I know it's going to get rough down there, but we have, it's another thing about living in 2019. If you're gonna be in a disaster anywhere, being in the United States during 2019 is probably the place to be. If you're going to be in a disaster, and while I certainly hope that I'm not proven wrong by this, usually these hurricanes in Florida cause an awful lot of cosmetic damage, but hopefully nothing irreplaceable, really, and that's lives. That's the only thing that really cannot be fixed by insurance companies and things like that. Some memorabilia, I guess, but that's trivial compared to people's lives. So I hope everybody's doing well down there, and take the advice of the authorities. That's not my usual card here, but I have ridden out two hurricanes, like had the eye go over me, but both times I was in Bermuda. And Bermuda is very rocky. It's got a strong reef around most of it. The houses there are built out of limestone, sturdy, and they are built for hurricanes. There's decorative shutters on every window in Bermuda, at least there was when I was there. You just simply close the wooden shutters and off you go. But Florida is particularly bad. I forget what the highest point in South Florida is, but I want to say it's about 7 feet above sea level, something like that. And things are very different down there. So if you get an evacuation order, I strongly recommend you take that advice. My sister was down there for think it was, pretty sure it was Hurricane Andrew. Yeah. And she was living on Miami Beach at the time, and it looked like it was going to come ashore in Miami Beach. So she went down to get out of the way of it. She went down to some friends in Homestead, and that's exactly where it landed. And Andrew, the only thing I remember most about Andrew was that Andrew was not so much a hurricane as it was just a 30-mile wide tornado. It was just insane. I went back to Key Biscayne where I grew up, and this would be 3 or 4 years after Andrew. And I simply couldn't, I didn't know where I was. It's not like, hey, I don't recognize any of the landmarks. It's like, what street is this? Where am I? It just scoured the island just clean. And when you don't have trees and things like that for reference, it really messes you up. But anyway, we're all praying for you down there and pulling for you, and I'm sure everybody will come out of this just fine. Okay, so as I said, behind the scenes, that's the story for this evening. So let's have a look at what we got in the questions. This might be an interesting topic. Who knows? It might be a 2-episoder. All right, here we go. I'll just jump into it. Why don't we? I'll put the questions over here. I'm going to put the comment stream over there. And put the camera here. Yeah, all right. It's starting to look like a plan, and you're going to go down there. I have this absolutely incredible monitor here. I just love it. It's just absolutely insane. 4K monitor. It's huge, curved screen, and it looks, everybody comes into the office, they go, oh my God, that monitor. And I'm just like, well, it is, this is my, it's not just my workspace, it's my workspace. So anyway, it's got lots of real estate on it. So I'm just trying to get these comments back up. Okay, there we go. All right, starting to look a little better here. So let's see what we got cooking tonight. Hey, look at that. I'm just going to go down in the order in which I see them. Top fan, Dave Olson. Dave is just as regular as the sunrise, honestly. In all of your travels in punditry, in all of my travels, lo these many years, in all of your travels in punditry, you must have encountered some angels and some jerks. Who was the nicest person you ever met, and who was the most deserving of a punch to the yapper? Wow. That is a superb question. That really is. And I'm going to run away now. Okay, I'm back. Let's see. I don't know if I can really just completely narrow it down. I can. Usually, your first impulse is the right one. The person who struck me the most as the friendliest person that I've met, I think, was unquestionably Ted Cruz. I would say unquestionably. Ted Cruz. Just when I met him, he had just an incredible warmth to him, and it's never gone away as far as I'm concerned. And so when I hear people say Ted's very cold and he's like a little reptilian and he's too cerebral, it's like I don't know who's doing his publicity or his campaign, but he is actually genuinely one of the nicest people I've ever met. He really, really is. He's just. He just comes to me anyway is exceedingly kind, and he's the kind of guy who listens to you like he's actually listening to you and not just because it's his job. So off the top of my head, I would say by far in the business, I would say Ted Cruz just rings a bell here. Let's see. I had a lot of fun with I had a lot of fun with Greg Gutfeld. I wouldn't say that he's a particularly warm or close guy, but we had a lot of laughs. I did 5 Red Eyes in the space of a couple of years back in the day, about 4 or 5 years ago. He was a lot of fun. Glenn Beck really, really surprised me too. I had a chance to introduce him 4 or 5 years ago, and I didn't know if he knew who I was. I was a big fan of his. I'm still a big fan of his. And we were in this relatively small room. I was going to introduce him, and I was thinking I'd go over and say hi to him and just introduce myself. And next thing I know, I'm at this table just scratching out some final notes, and I look down. He's kind of crouched next to me and just telling me, you know, how much he had liked the work I did, and I had a really good introduction, a funny introduction. And then Glenn got up there and just we like needling each other. He just kept, I wasn't interrupting his speech. He just kept kind of throwing it back at me, and I'd throw it back up. And so it was just really fun. It was genuinely fun. One person who I met just 2 weeks ago, who really surprised me quite a lot, was Katie Hopkins. I was at an event where she was the keynote speaker, and for those of you who don't know, Katie Hopkins is a British kind of TV personality. And I have to tell you, Katie Hopkins is one of the funniest people I've ever encountered. She's just fast, really, really, really quick, and genuinely friendly and nice. You know, some people you can tell are really not into it. She was great at the event, but afterwards, a bunch of us went out for a little drink, and she's just quick and genuinely, genuinely funny. And not only that, she's, you know, I mean, she's one of those people that likes making provocative statements, and she does that. She does it well, and I consider that just to be a person who's not afraid to be in this fight. But I have to tell you, she struck me as an extremely kind person as well. I'm just kind of going down the list here. John Voight is without question one of the warmest people I've ever met. He's just a genuine, sincere guy. I'll get to the other ones. There's not many of the other ones. Let me think. Yeah, I think, you know, if you have to really start scratching your head on it, then you probably run out of your first impulses. I'm going to call a very brief timeout. So for those of you who are fans of the show, you may want to mute the sound for maybe 30 or 40 seconds, because I don't want to say anything here that's going to destroy your opinion of me or anything like that. So for those of you who have sensitive stomachs, you might want to just turn the sound just for 20, 30 seconds. Here we go. I have to tell you, in all honesty, Andrew Klavan may be the best person I ever met. He's just an absolutely, really good man. Okay, you can turn the sound back up again. Anyway, who's most deserving of a punch in the yapper? Definitely Andrew Klavan. What a where do you start? I mean, you know, it's like on some level, it's like you're just on some level you don't even want to you don't even really kind of want to grace him, you know, by putting him in the top 5. If he had some ability or some talent or something, then it would be, you know, worth doing. But I guess he's most person that you would. I guess Andrew Klavan's the person who you're most likely to pass in a hallway and not notice. In terms of other people that could use a punch in the yapper, I honestly am having a hard time thinking of people who I thought really could use a punch in the yapper. I don't think I've met anybody really. You'd think I would have a few. Certainly no one I've ever worked with. No, I mean, there are people who are friendlier than others, and the ones I mentioned were standouts for me. Scott Ott goes without saying. When it comes for candidates for, you know, being punched in the yapper. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty much it. Do I socialize with Klavan? I do not. That's all kind of a mystery to me too. Those guys are just down the street there. Ben Shapiro and Jeremy and the gang. I'm just slow today for some reason. Mike Knowles. I can feel there's like sand in the gears. I never met Dick Durbin. No, I didn't. Now that actually reminds me. I can tell you I did sit next to Mitch McConnell, and that was not a particularly enthusiasm-filled event. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the roster. It really seems like there should be at least one or two people who I just want to say, God Almighty. Now, I can tell you two people who I'm not going to say deserve a punch in the apparatus. I don't want any mistaken identity about that. But I did meet two people that stand out in my head for being just like force of nature. We're talking about hurricanes a second ago. Being in the presence of two people who had that kind of, my God, it's like a human hurricane. Let me think here. I honest to God do not know what the heck is the matter with my brain today. I really don't. I cannot believe it. I cannot believe I'm going to have to search for this. It drives me nuts. I don't know what it is. I really don't. It's just, maybe it's just today, but today all day, it seems like that I have just been missing things. So hang on a second. I gotta look it up here. It's embarrassing. God, his face is right. I am just embarrassed because I know him really pretty well. I can tell you about the. Here we go. But, how could I have forgotten it? I really, it's just I haven't seen him in a while. One person who comes across very, very forcefully is Robert Davi, who I like very, very much. I like him very much. But we watched the 2008 election debates. We watched one of them at his house, believe it or not. And Robert Davi was there, and I'm not making this up. He had one of those enormous projection screens, but from the mid 90s, the ones that are really deep and they've like rear projected kind of things. He had this gigantic, enormous thing, which was standard definition TV. It was just a huge one. And no fooling now. He had a black cane with a silver knob on the top. A black cane with a silver knob on the top, and he was screaming at Obama and just I thought he was going to smash the TV set, and it was like we walk out of there and we're going to the car, and I think I went there with Jeremy Boring and we went out, and I just said something else flying around behind me here, and I said, dude, we have just had the Robert Davi experience. It's like, yeah, that's right. And that we figured that would be an excellent name for an indie band, by the way, the Robert Davi Experience. He's Robert Davi is Robert Davi. And by the way, Robert Davi is not only a great patriot, he's also an absolutely astonishing singer. I remember he was, I'm going to be doing my Sinatra. He doesn't do a Sinatra impersonation by any means. He just sings Sinatra songs. I think he sings them better than Sinatra does. He's shockingly good singer, really good, and I like him very much. Somebody mentioned Dwight Schultz. I haven't seen him in 4 or 5 years. Without question, one of my favorite people. Just absolutely great guy. Absolutely great guy. And the thing about Dwight is that Dwight, the top of Dwight's head will come off over things. And you begin to realize he's not faking it. He just gets so excited and angry about some things, He's supposed to be excited about and angry about things. So I just adore him. I just love him. I'd like to hire him every chance I get. I think Dwight's just a wonderful guy, very smart guy. Eric Blake wants to know about Kelsey Grammer. I've met Kelsey a few times. Kelsey is extremely polite and a very dignified guy. But my impression of Kelsey Grammer is that Kelsey Grammer doesn't share a lot of Kelsey Grammer with people who he doesn't know very well, and I respect that too. I really do. I don't want to say he's not a warm guy, but he's not a. He strikes me as a very private guy, and like I say, I kind of admire that. So there's that. The other person who was just kind of a lay low the second they walk in the room, and I'm not making this up because there's no way I can make this up, and that's Gene Simmons. I got a chance to direct Gene Simmons in a little video I wrote. Not that there was much direction, really. It was more of a narration than anything. But Gene Simmons comes in, and I'm not making this up. This is exactly precisely what happened. We were in the office, and Gene Simmons came in. We're going to go into this room and tape it, shoot it in front of a green screen. I'd never met him before. Jeremy introduced me to him, said I was the writer, and we're going to be recording this thing. And Gene Simmons, never seen him before, walks right up to me, shakes my hand firmly, looks me right in the eyes, and he says, "You are an exceptionally handsome man." You're going to do very well in prison. I liked him immediately. How do you not like that guy? How do you not like that? If that's not the greatest introduction, I've never. That's as good as it gets. Absolutely the best thing ever. And he's a great guy. So, but both of those guys are like, holy shit, Gene Simmons and Robert Davi together be more than a room can handle. Last thing I'll say on this one before we move on, I do remember having an enormous amount of satisfaction by making John Voight laugh so hard that he actually started to cry. Just, and it wasn't really that funny, I don't think. We were talking about actors, and we were talking about Wrath of Khan, and he had been on Bill Shatner's Raw Nerve, which I edited, and I edited him fairly, but that was the last show I did, and they re-edited the show because I didn't make John look good. I didn't manipulate John as much as they would have liked, so they recut that show. But so we were talking about William Shatner, and I just remember saying, one thing I can tell you, John, thing about William Shatner is, you hire that guy, you're going to get your acting dollars worth. And he started laughing. He said, you for every $10 you pay Shatner, you get $13 a performance, or something along those lines. He just crying. He thought that was so funny. It's true. You get the role, then you get plus another 40% at no additional charge. He is not a nice man. He's just not. I've never heard anybody say anything nice about the guy, and I would join in that chorus. He's not at all a nice guy, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be. He's on my wall here in several different places. I'm not interested in so much the actor as I am the character, and that's a conversation for a different time. Okay, so moving on. Martin Archer. Hey, Martin. Whose show have you not pundited on but you'd like to, and whose show would you like the opportunity to pundit on more? To my knowledge, you've only ever been mentioned by Rush, but he's never been on a show or on the same stage together. He has Mark Stein as a guest host sometimes, and you, Bill, could do a 3-hour show with no problem. Can you see that or other much wider exposure ever happening? Well, those are two different questions there. I haven't done nearly as much TV as I could have or probably should have or should. It's still kind of a mystery to me. I haven't really been on Fox, but that's just a marketing issue, and I'm just not very good at it. And if you are good at it and you want to talk, I'd be happy to talk to you about a percentage. I haven't done a lot of TVs or a lot of interviews, but I have done a fair number of speaking events. I've introduced Mark Levin twice, introduced Rush. I'm sorry, introduced Glenn Beck, got a chance to talk to Rush. And, I know Ben's got that Sunday afternoon show. I wouldn't mind doing that. And, I try to do all of the ones that I'm asked to do, and I don't think I've ever turned anybody down. Got a call from Crowder once, it's like a year ago or something. And I think he was like I was like so I felt like he's got a guest booked, and then that guest cancels, and then he calls somebody else. And when that guy cancels, then he calls me. But I'd like to do it. I have a lot of fun interviewing people, but I have more fun being interviewed. I really had a good time with Dave Rubin. That was a fun episode, and I'd love to do them all. So you can send your letters and cards, and we'll just start a movement where the public demands it. Yeah, it'd be fun. I love doing interviews, and especially love doing interviews with people who really they can roll the ball forward. I have to tell you, I was really kind of sad. I'm not going to mention any names or anything, I mean this sincerely. I have the greatest respect for this. I was supposed to be doing a a Skype interview next day or two with somebody for an hour, and I was looking forward to it a lot. And they did something about showed me who was going to be either talking on the same hour or advertising during that hour, and it was a couple of 9/11 deniers. It was like a 9/11 engineers, and the mysteries of 9/11. And I just said, to Shelley, please express my sincere regrets that I'm not able to do that show or any other show. I'm just not going to do it. They're great people, and I admire them, and I wish them the very best. But not only am I not going to do that show, I'm not going to do any show about that. I mean, to me, when people say things, well, how do you explain Building 7? It's, I don't know what to say. Two of the tallest buildings in the world fell on it, cut it in half, it burned for 5 hours, and then it collapsed. And this is a sign that somebody launched a missile that none of us saw. Sorry. But anyway, there you go. All right, so I would like to do all of those. We're back to the punch to the yapper. I will go ahead and answer that. It didn't occur to me at the time. I genuinely couldn't think of anybody. But I have to say the one person that, in my experience, that is probably on the top list of a punch to the yapper for me would be Mark Stein. And I've never spoke to Mark Stein. I've never talked with him. We've never met or shaken hands or anything. But when Mark Stein had his show on CRTV, he stole my logo. He stole my homunculus. He stole this guy. And this guy was animated on the beginning of his show. And I know it was this guy and not just some other guy, because if you look carefully, you'll see that the way that my friend Buster, who's a graphic artist, the way he drew the collar is really kind of unusual. He didn't draw all the way, just drew lines suggesting the collar and the spread of the tie and the pocket handkerchief and all that. So I saw this animation for the beginning of a show, and I thought, okay. So I just said, all right. Probably what happened is he had his graphic guys, probably not even conservatives, and they're thinking, what the hell do these conservatives look like? Did a little tour, found the website, liked that angle, and did it. And so I basically wrote to him or them, not personally to him, but to the producer of the show, and very politely explained it, and not only politely explained it, gave them a graceful bow out. I just said basically what I just said to you. Look, I'm sure it's just some guy on the graphics team who just, just saw it and liked it. But this, and there was some other thing, something about the shape of the knot. There was something, two really, really specifically identifying things here. And we got back a letter saying it's not, we didn't take it from you, and no. And then that knocked my, my atomic bomb afterburner mind into gear. And I started to do a detailed analysis of these things graphically, and I dropped the friendly tone, and I pointed out these other things and so on, and I pointed out that it was actually harming me, that there's not an enormous number or unlimited number of conservative pundits, and that this had been my my logo for the longest time. It wasn't trademarked, but there it was. And then they came back and they altered the collar. And then they claimed that there was nothing there. And then my response and our attorney's response was, look, the fact that you altered it is an indication that you stole it. He showed you posts, time-stamped posts, my attorney speaking, that all of this happened. I didn't want any money or anything. I just wanted him to take my logo down, Anyway, it just, I was really pretty surprised and disappointed at the combative attitude we got, because, like I said, we not only did not go in there guns drawn, we went in there our hearts filled with the 11th commandment, thou shalt not attack other Republicans or other conservatives. And I was really pretty disappointed, and I got pretty upset about it, pretty angry about it. And we were in the middle of escalating this thing, dealing with CRTV when Stein's show got canceled. That took a lot, not a lot. It pretty much took the fight away. Somebody just told me in the comments stream he still uses it. I don't care anymore. But I suspect that on some level, once somebody has a legal issue with your logo, I suspect that on some level, Mark Stein must have been consulted about this, Mark, this guy says this, or what do you want to do? So somebody said, fight it. And then I heard, not only anecdotally, but through a number of published news reports about his behavior on that show, and just, not rehearsing, not showing up, late, all kinds of, sort of egregious charges on his expense account. Didn't pay his production company, never paid his production company, left them holding the bag for tens of thousands of dollars of stuff. And I remember thinking, that's just really surprising and kind of a shame. But there you go. It's probably nothing else to blame for it but the fact that he's Canadian. It's well known that Canadians are just a bunch of low-life liars, criminals, and assorted villains who have no respect at all for decency and good manners. So anyway, that's been quite a while ago. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. What happened to this? Cheryl Toomey, what happened to the second half of this week's Backstage? It stopped when Steve was mid-sentence and we never saw what Scott's show was going to be. I am unaware of that. I suppose I can look at it, but I'm not aware of it. So I will look into that as soon as we're done with this. That's a little disturbing. Dave Olson, what happened to Carla? I miss her Hitchcockian cameos. Carla went on to do representation and stuff about a little over 2 years ago now. So I wish her well, and haven't really stayed much in touch with her since then. Susan Speakman, would you ever consider doing some type of conversation or interview with Mike Rowe? I would love to interview Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe, I didn't put Mike Rowe didn't come to mind in terms of like, like the friendliest person, only because he's just very low key and quiet, but he's just. I saw him at the airport, and I just said, Mike, and he's like, we just as warm. Mike. The great thing about Mike Rowe is that Mike Rowe is exactly who 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 you would expect him to be. There's the character he plays of Mike Rowe, his personality, his on-screen persona, absolutely him. And just he's the most American guy I can think of. He's got the most American face, he's got the most American voice, he's got the most American attitude. And I have nothing but enormous regard for him. And when we were talking very briefly at LAX, I was going, he was coming home or coming here to visit. He doesn't live here, but he had some work to do with the studios down here or something. And we were talking, and he just finished one of his, the way I heard it, I forget what episode it was, but I said, Mike, I got to tell you, I just saw this a couple days ago, and it was just wonderful. It was really, really terrific. And it had gotten, I don't know, 800,000 views, something like that. And he said, yeah, you know what's strange about that, Bill? It's like, that thing's got, I'm making up the numbers, but they were something in this general ballpark. He said, that thing's been seen by 850,000 people. And what is flying through the air here? There's like, I mean, it's like avatar spores, floating through the sky behind me here. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, he said 850,000 people. It's a good number. He said when I was at Discovery Channel, if Dirty Jobs had done 300,000, they would have sent me roses and a bouquet and a limo, with champagne. It was an indication of just how much things have changed and how much reach these kind of things have. These things sometimes just seem so silly, but when you look at the numbers, they're really quite shocking and remarkable. Somebody was talking, I forget who it was, I should remember this, it wasn't super long time ago, but somebody was saying that there are more people who keep chickens as pets in America than watch CNN, something like that. And anyway, rods, oh yeah, rods, that's it, Merlin, rods. So yeah, I just love Mike Rowe, and I think Mike Rowe ought to run for president. And I don't even care what party Mike Rowe is. I got a feeling I could guess, but he's just a great guy. Real pleasure to meet him. Okay, let's see. Steve Darrow, I love all my fellow Strata Loungers, but fighting Texas Aggies play football tonight, so I'll have to watch on YouTube like a peasant. Okay. Good to see you there, Steve, on YouTube. I hope you're doing well there. Miserable peasant. Labor Secretary. Yeah, that's great suggestion there, wheel to wheel. Let's see. Steve Young. Larry Elder, Alfonso Rachel, Diamond and Silk, Brandon Tatum, Patricia Dixon, and Candace Owens all on stage for a beatdown of the scientific racist Bill Whittle. Yeah. That had happened. I'm not going to get into the details of this, but you do, this whole thing I've talked about many times. I did that event in Illinois, and Media Matters had published this hit piece on me, and the candidate backed out, and then it got in the papers everywhere that the Republican candidate had backed out of this because known racist Bill Whittle was going to be there. And her name is Jeannie Ives, by the way. But it was just devastating to me. And then 2 days after that happened, in fact, I don't think we flew home first. Natasha was with me, thank God. We went from Illinois to Arizona, Tucson, I think, but I'm not sure. And I was just, I was just absolutely just shattered by this. It was the only time I can actively remember saying, I don't want to do this. I do not want to go up there. And it was helped and not helped at the same time by the guy who organized the event saying, hey, I just want to let you know, we gotten some calls about this, but we'd seen your stuff and, we don't think there's anything to it. And I said, thanks. So I went up and I did my thing. And then Brandon Tatum got up there and he just stood up there and he looked right at me and he said, "That's why I'm proud to be a conservative." And coming from him at that time was just so much, you know, just like validation. And I talk about fighting this kind of, peer pressure and social proof all the time, but it is a very, very deep human emotion, and I'm certainly not immune to it. I'd love to tell you it didn't bother me. It bothered the living hell out of me. And I'd love to tell you that, the fact that this was coming from a black conservative didn't mean more at the time than it did coming from, let's say, the guy who organized the event, but it did. It meant a lot more. A lot more. And I will always be grateful to him for that. In fact, I'm in some discussion about doing an interview with Brandon in the very near future. Brandon Tatum is one of those guys who's just a good man. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's a former policeman. He's just a good man, and that's all it takes these days, to fight these bastards. Just the kind of example. And I like him very, very, very much. Alfonso Rachel, obviously, we did just tons of work together. I just Zoe's one of my favorite people. I'm looking forward to working with him in show business. He's a very good actor, which doesn't surprise me. And Zoe is just rock solid, and I always liked his commentary. I got him the job at PJTV. I've been trying to apologize ever since, but he's best. He's I remember the first time I saw Zoe, I just thought this guy has got to get he's got to get some audience, and he's just one of the best voices out there. And he's one of the best voices out there because he has been down the path. His family, and all of the things he was subjected to growing up in terms of the state and Democrats and handouts and all that other stuff. So he's just a terrific guy. Exnor mentions Colleen Noir from NRA. Colleen struck me as a very nice guy. Again, didn't get to be too close to him. We got a chance to talk a couple times at conventions, shook hands, admired the work he does, but I don't really know him very well. But Zoe I know, and Brandon I know and admire. I don't know very well, but I admire him. Candace Owens did the first of these TPUSA things that we did, these 60-second SmackDowns, and she's been nice as can be. And I actually interviewed Diamond and Silk on NRA TV, and I loved them. I thought they were great. So actually, just great. Eric Blake says he's interviewing Zoe for Western Free Press. You tell him I said hi, and you tell him I'm a big fan of his. And if there's anything I can do to help him, I will do it. I'd be happy to do it. So moving on. Hey, look at that. Top fan Eric Blake. Oh my God, I realize there's a picture there. I might actually get a look at Eric Blake after all this time. Hey, hold on a second now. Let's go. It's not my fault. I just, come on. So that's Eric Blake. Well, now it's all clear to me. Okay. How you doing, Eric? Let's see. Where am I? Back here. All right, Eric, good to see your face. I'm trying to get back on Facebook. Facebook is so bizarre the way when you own the page, it just stacks so many things in such a weird order. Okay, now everything's all shuffled, so I'm just gonna have to go through it here. Just Eric Blake. Okay, I got 2 questions from him. I don't think. Sorry. All right. Anyway, 2. Yeah. All right. Top fan Eric Blake says the coup of the century would be you booking Elon Musk to come on the Stratosphere Lounge as a guest. No, regardless which person you've interviewed in your career as a pundit was the hardest to book, and who is the easiest. I haven't had much experience booking people. Rush is tough to get a hold of. Rush is understandably reluctant to do a lot of public speaking, especially interviews, because he's pretty deaf. He's pretty much deaf. It's not a secret. He's not just hard of hearing. He's really very, very difficult for him to be in conversations with people, which is such a shame. Although any time Rush is spending talking to somebody else is time that Rush isn't talking himself, and that is wasted time. When Rush is on, he's the king. He's the undisputed king. He has Rush Limbaugh taught me a lot. I never listened to his show. I never listened to anybody's show. I never ever do. I've never watched a Glenn Beck show. I've never watched a Levin show, Crowder. I've never watched Ben or any of them. I don't watch them ever, and I don't watch them because I don't like them very much. No, I don't watch them because I don't want to be talking somebody else's, not their talking points. I just don't. If I have an original thought, I want it to come from the vacuum. I don't want to pick up something that somebody said in passing and then pretend like it's mine. So I just kind of keep away from that. But yeah. Anyway. So Rush is a difficult person to book. I guess if I had to say the easiest person to book, I'd have to go with Scott Ott on that one. I think Scott and I are equally easy to book. I think Scott and I, basically the phone rings, and before we find out who it is, it's like, ring, we'll do it. And that's pretty much for both of us. But I don't have a lot of experience booking, so there you go. Okay, David Crean. There's another question from Eric, but I think I answered that earlier. David Crean, yeah, I think. What are your thoughts on Michael Savage? You've mentioned a desire to appear for Rush Limbaugh in the past. Would you ever consider hosting the Savage Nation? I would consider hosting anything. I did Rusty Humphrey's show. I think I did it 5 times. 3-hour show nationwide. I think I've done it 5 times, but it's in years since I've done that. Yeah, I could do Savage Nation, I think. You have to really know your audience, and to some degree, every speaker and every event I do and every event everybody does, if you're any good at this job, you try to tailor not just the content of the speech, but you try to tailor your delivery for the audience that's there. And I talk to Tea Party groups differently than I talk to university students, although I talk about the same things. You don't want to be pandering. I can tell you with genuine pride that when I'm talking to groups of black people, I don't put on an affected Southern accent like certain other former presidential candidates that we could mention, and I don't say that I carry a bottle of hot sauce in my purse all the time, just lying through her teeth, Hillary Clinton. I don't pander to people, but I can turn up the intensity or down depending on the case, and I think that's just being professional. Let me think about that. So Savage Nation. So I would do Savage Nation. I do most of them. Somebody asked, Eric asked, even InfoWars. I would not do InfoWars. I wouldn't sit in for them. And I've had years ago been asked to do an appearance on them, and I declined with thanks. And I declined with thanks in the same way that I had to decline with thanks this other interview that I wanted to do. So let me just get this crystal clear about this. There are people out there who I disagree with on some fundamental levels about important things. We're all on the same team, and to me, this is very, very important that I'm crystal clear about this. When I say that I wouldn't host Alex Jones' show or be on the Alex Jones show, I'm not saying that I'm opposed to Alex Jones. I'm just saying that's not me, and he does things that I just am not comfortable doing. I happen to think that Alex Jones is wrong 4 out of 5 times, but I also am perfectly happy to admit that Alex Jones, when he's right, is right, and he's right ahead of everybody else. So I think there's tremendous room for him, and anytime somebody's making a good point for our team, they have my full support. I don't want to speak badly about anybody in this business. I don't have bad feelings about anybody in this business. Eric Blake mentioned Paul Joseph Watson. I have to tell you, I have an enormous amount of respect for him. Paul Joseph Watson he's one of the few people that I will actually, I don't watch a lot of him, but when I see one of his videos come up, if I'm going to watch it, I'll watch the whole thing. Pat Condell is another guy who I haven't seen much of lately. I used to watch every single video he did. I thought he was great too. I think Paul is really got the snark and the sharpness finely tuned. I mean, he's a razor, and that's, I mean, needless to say, my personal language is a lot saltier than the language I use on the shows, and I've never, I think I've sworn on this show, I've dropped the F-bomb on this show once, and I remember very clearly when I did that and why I did it. And I don't think I've ever done it in a speaking event or maybe not be an S-bomb, maybe the S-grenade or something. I just don't, and I do it out of respect for my audience. So there's the whole language thing. I got some serious pushback for saying things like the Russians handed us our ass in Apollo 11, and I gave that serious thought, and I really did wrestle with it and wonder, I mean, I was aware that I did it. My point is that in today's world, in 2019, having somebody say they just handed us our ass is not a very, in terms of the available amount of obscenity in the typical YouTube video, that did not strike me as high on the list. But it was enough to bother some people and enough for them to say, I can't show this to my kids now. And I have nothing but respect for that. I really have nothing but respect for that. And I have to tell you, just since this little sideline came up, it's a backstage issue. I'm happy to talk about this. When I do something like that, especially when I'm doing Stratosphere Lounge or something like that, I'll occasionally just get angry or whatever, and I don't do it very often at all. But that's different. When I write something like that, I just want people who maybe had a problem with that to know that number one, it's not that I wasn't aware of it, and number two, it's not that I didn't care. It's not that I didn't care about people being upset about it. It's not that I didn't care about any of that stuff. What I had to do in that case was pretty simple. I had to weigh the effectiveness of it versus the damage it would do. And on that one, I came out saying that on balance it made the show better. If I thought that it was gratuitous, just I don't use gratuitous bad language, and when I say something like the A word, I do it advisedly. But in that particular case, I felt like that's what they did. I just felt like that's the main reason I did it. It wasn't so much even a calculation. I look back on the early days of the space program, and what I really feel inside is that they handed us our assets. All there is to it. They just did. And anyway, it always bothers me when I have to make that kind of decision, and it bothers me that it bothers people because I understand that. And sometimes I make a decision that in my opinion, is for the greater good. Now we're going to see, if we're not dead yet, kids, but when we get these science fiction videos going. I know it sounds like I've given up on that. I have not under any circumstances. But then when we're making content, fictional content with CG characters, I don't know how far we're going to go on the language, but they are going to talk like fighter pilots and cops and things like that. And people say you don't need it. And generally speaking, they're right. Certainly you don't need all of it. But on some level, since the entire idea of that kind of content is to be an antibiotic pill for your dog wrapped up in bacon, the profanity to some degree is the bacon. It's what sheds the image that so many young people have about conservatives, that they're just utterly straight-laced, totally square, and I don't know. I know that people, when I hear people just gratuitously using the F-bomb, I just want to turn it off. I really just don't. But then again, I'll listen to some kind of movie, or I'll watch, great example, Lone Survivor. When those guys were talking, they sounded like they were SEALs talking to me. And when they said the F word in Lone Survivor or Soul Survivor, it didn't bother me because that felt real. Anyway, yes, that's perfectly it. Sinister Minds got it exactly right. Swearing is best used sparingly and for emphasis. That is as well said as I could possibly have put it. Precisely correct. There's an enormous difference between dropping the F word everywhere just because you think that's how people talk. A lot of people do talk that way. But if you, and this is like any other tool, if you over deploy it, it loses its edge. And so, yeah, my God, I'm gonna do a screen grab of that. Honest to God, I really am. Sinister Mind, that was, it was a thing of beauty. Here we go. Now, of course, everybody's, for God's sakes, everybody's entering things here. Just gotta grab this thing. Good God, that's hard to do when people are constantly. There we go. Anyway, yeah, no, that's it. It's perfect. It's best used sparingly and for emphasis. Speaking of turns of phrases, I'm going to go off topic here for a minute, because as I just wander around YouTube, I often find people whose content I like, and then I'll just start watching that. It's almost never political content, at least not overtly political. So I'm just going to call a little time out here and go off the rails for a second. First of all, what I'm hearing from gamers, and especially Star Wars fans who are not political, at least they weren't political a couple years ago, I am finding people who are not in politics in any way cursing progressives, cursing social justice warriors, cursing this invasive feminism, the left ruining Star Wars and getting into comic books, movies, and getting into video games has done something that I didn't think was possible, and that is it has turned a generation of left-leaning, apathetic people into rock-ribbed conservatives. Hi, we're all good, thank you. We're good. No, thank you. No, thank you. Good night. Bye-bye. So that is very, very important. Very important. But the divergence I wanted to make was this, and I'm going to get the exact quote, even though it's only three-word sentence or something. I'm allergic to, what is it? Was it Retin-A? Here's T. William Shatner, best bad actor that ever lived. This really grabbed me. So yesterday I was listening to a channel called Jim Can't Swim and Retinax. Jim Can't Swim and Retinox A. Yeah, it's coming through now. Anyway, so I was listening to this guy, and he's a psychologist, and I don't know if he's got a background in interrogation, but basically what he does, oh, you love that channel? I didn't know anybody else had heard of it. Jim Can't Swim. Basically what he does is he takes publicly available interrogation tapes of murderers confessing to what they did and breaks it down and analyzes the strategy of the interrogator and analyzes the defense patterns and the evasions and the strategies of the person being interrogated. It's really fascinating. Now, this guy did a piece on Ted Bundy. He was talking about what he called the death row phenomenon, which in itself is just something I'm going to have to talk about. But basically, what he's saying is, and I need to go back and make sure I got this correct because I'm virtually positive this is what he said. But basically what he's saying is that the U.S. experience with death row used to be that if you were sentenced to death, you'd be executed within a matter of a day or two, or sometimes even hours after the verdict. But now, I don't know what the average time is, but it's pretty close to 20 years. It's certainly in excess of 10, I think. And what he was saying is that being incarcerated on death row largely consists of solitary confinement, and certainly consists of waking up every day, counting how many days you may have left, living in this state of perpetual, not just anxiety. I mean, that's the most anxiety you can have, right? Are they going to kill me today? Is it coming tomorrow? It's going to be next week. Have they set a date? It's an unbelievable mental strain, and because of the appeals process and so on, we put people through it for 15 years, 20 years in some cases. Now, here's what's interesting. When I hear these people talking about 20 years or 10 years on death row and how stressful it is, my first reaction is, well, was it as stressful as the experience that your victim was having when you murdered them? Would you go as far as say it's that stressful? That's my first reaction to these kind of things. When I hear people talking about, oh, it's just, this is just living hell, it's like, no, it's still living. I'm a little more, I'd like to hear the story of the person you murdered before I start sending you a whole lot of sympathy. Nevertheless, here's what's interesting about this. He claims, and I suspect he's right, I've seen this sort of anecdotally in a number of documentaries. It's a really interesting point, a very interesting point. And basically the argument goes something like this. The death row effect puts you under such stress and gives you so much solitude and so much time to reflect upon the very most important things in life that not in all cases by any means, but in many cases, statistically significant number of cases, that 5, 10, 15 years on death row so fundamentally changes a person, and not just their personality, actually rewires their brain chemically, so fundamentally changes them that they're no longer the person that committed those crimes. And I actually find that to be not only believable but compelling. And so that puts us in a really strange moral world where the person who we're executing for committing the murder is not the person that committed the murder. In many cases, they go through, entire periods. They reconnect with their family. They find religion. They feel remorse and guilt and all of this stuff they didn't feel at the time of the crime. So just for the sake of it, I happen to think there's something to this. I need to look into it a little more carefully. But if so, it leaves you with some interesting ethical choices. So if you just accept that it happens in some cases, that the person who you end up executing or threaten to execute for 20 years is no longer the same person, then it seems to me you have to make a decision. You are either going to have to execute that person within a short period of time, or you're going to have to decide that it defaults into a life sentence. And I don't even know if a life sentence is stressful enough to trigger the death row effect. That's what's so interesting about it. It's almost like in order to burn that toxicity and that murder out of people, you have to scare them to death every single day for 15 or 20 years, and then they actually change. Anyway, that's not what I was talking about. That was just something that came up on that. But in the death row phenomenon video, there's an interview with Ted Bundy. And Ted Bundy was interviewed by James Dobson, I think, the pastor, the Christian evangelist. And here's what's interesting about Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy is probably the only mass murderer who was intelligent enough and articulate enough to actually explain what it's like to be a serial murderer, rapist, necrophiliac monster. And it's easy to feel sympathy for somebody who's that articulate. I remember when they put one of these guys to death in California. The guy's nickname was Football and stuff, and he'd written a children's book. So therefore, we can't possibly enforce the death penalty. And my thought is, well, he murdered 3 people in cold blood. In prison, he mocked them, begging for their lives. So I say, hey, off the planet, please. But here's all of this just to say this one thing. So Bundy was talking about how he got to be Ted Bundy. And Jim Can't Swim, the channel, made the case that Ted Bundy is not, in fact, a psychopath. He is a malignant narcissist, malignant to say the least, but he's not a psychopath. And the reason he's not a psychopath is that Ted Bundy was defending his parents. He was saying, my parents had nothing to do with this. I had great parents, lived in a great house. And the guy's point was psychopaths don't do that. They don't feel anything for anybody. Bundy was feeling guilty about he didn't want to hurt his parents, didn't want to hurt any. And so anyway, he goes on and on and on. And he talked about just how this thing would kind of come over him. And I've had those kind of rages come over me. And I've just been more successful in disposing of bodies than Bundy, I guess. But seriously, folks, but here's what Bundy said. He was saying that what pushed this is what he was not saying, actually, and this is what I admired about Bundy in this moment and what I thought was so profoundly interesting. Bundy would talk about the effect that pornography had on him, violent pornography especially, and he went to enormous pains to say that the violent pornography did not make him go out and murder people, but he did say, however, when he was challenged on this by Dr. Dobson, he did say that this violent pornography was the indispensable link, and I wrote that term down, the indispensable link, and that to me is absolutely critical, because to me that's exactly the word we need to be using and the expression we need to be using when we talk about these school shooters. When we talk about these school shooters and either video game violence in movies and television, and especially 24-hour fame, none of those things made the person do it. And yet, one of those, at least one, if not all of them, are in fact indispensable links. If you take that away, it doesn't happen. So having it there doesn't cause it, but taking it away stops it. And that puts you in a hell of a position, you know. And you kind of have to come back, I think, to, okay, well, it completes the circuit for people who are far, far, far out there on the human fringe. And a lot of people want to say, therefore, we should just destroy the switch and just not let that circuit be closed. We need to ban all these things. But that's punishing the innocent. And then you come back to, yeah, okay, but, you know, nevertheless, it is causing all of this moral decay and all the rest of it. It's a thorny issue. Ultimately, I kind of come down to, if you have to force somebody to do something, it's probably not a good idea. That's it. And the correlation between fatherlessness and mass shooters is the one that really sticks. And again, it's not like the lack of fathers caused these guys to become mass murderers, but at the same time, it was an indispensable link in the process of them becoming mass murderers. And that was a really, really big insight for me. And I have to tell you, Bundy was fighting for his life. He didn't want to die. He was, he was using everything he had, and he was a smart guy. But I personally judged him to be sincere when he was saying, I just don't want to be misunderstood. It's important that you understand what I'm saying here, because this is going to happen again. And the number of times that he specifically stopped himself to interject how emphatically he was saying, I'm not saying that this caused me to be a Ted Bundy. That's the term he used. I'm specifically not saying that pornography caused me to kill these people. But if I had not been exposed to that violent pornography, I wouldn't have done it. And I just find that really, really not just interesting, but important. Important. And I think it's so interesting because there's no immediate solution. And maybe there isn't a solution. I suspect that there isn't. I suspect that this is some of the friction heat of the machine, and you can oil it as much as you want to and eliminate it, and that's all great, and you should try to do that. But nevertheless, gears are going to generate heat. You can get as much of that heat out of there as you can. Good for you. But you can't stop them from generating heat, and so, maybe this is just the price we have to pay. But anyway, it was worth me going a little tangent on here. Do a couple more, I think, then I'll be on my way. Christopher Dale Goodwin, do you wear pants during the lounge? Well, it depends. I do for the anniversary shows, certainly, because I think to not wear pants during the anniversary shows would be just a sign of a lack of respect for my audience. One of the reasons I'm so fond of speaking in front of the podium is it gives me a chance to be a lot more comfortable, not have to wear any pants when I'm doing a big speaking event. The problem with that is that many times you have to come in from the side off stage, so you really kind of need to know in advance really what your actual stage setup is going to be. But to answer your question, I would say that and my wife will back me up on this, it is my philosophy in life to go around wearing pants as infrequently as possible and still retain the good graces of civilized people everywhere. Let's see. Let's see here. Cameron Smith, what do you do or tell yourself to quell the butterflies before you go on stage to speak? Cameron, I'm going to tell you this straight up. I never, ever, ever get stage fright of any kind. I've never had it. I've had it as an actor, but I've never had it in a speaking event. And I suspect I'd completely forgotten my planetarium experience. People say, how did you just walked into this? I thought, well, I said, I was an acting student for a while, but I didn't do that much acting. It was mostly writing and directing and stuff. And where did this kind of ease of speaking to people come from? And then I realized I was doing live lectures for an hour for people, 300 people in the dark, since I was 14. And even then I just took to it. I've always just been a good storyteller. I remember even in high school, it was independent of the planetariums going on at the same time. There was like a special night at high school. It was one of these kind of, like one of these sort of faux adult things where you get like, they bring in like a couple of casino games like roulette and blackjack, and you're issued Monopoly money, and and you get punch that doesn't have any alcohol in it. It's kind of here's like a chance to pretend to be an adult kind of thing, or James Bond or whatever. And I was emceeing one of those, and my teacher, homeroom teacher, I didn't have any class with, who'd always been pretty lukewarm towards me, just came up afterwards and said, I had no idea, no idea you were able to do that. And at the time I thought, and looking back on it, I realize that, and I've had therapists tell me about this too, that on some level, and this is, I have to say, this is pre-marriage, because being married, I think, has absolutely, I don't want to say cured me of this, but it's certainly united these kind of things. on some level, I am much more comfortable. Well, I've already said and there's no question about this. I would much rather be brought up from the audience and speak in front of 3,000 people without notes than go up to somebody at a bar and say hi, without question. No brainer for me. And on some level, I think it was suggested to me and to the degree that you believe it, this is a kind of a personality that I adopt. The reason I'm as honest as I am on the Stratosphere Lounge show is because I'm trying to make sure that isn't the case. You know, that there's no. I just try to be as honest as I can be, so that and it's to the degree that it's for your benefit is great. But the reason I do it is because, to me, being honest about the things I'm not proud of maintains a sense of humility and a sense of it's almost like an insulin shot that I have to keep giving myself, because I have a mortal fear, and I'm quite sure I'm completely actually immunized against this by now. But I have a mortal fear of becoming a me monster, and so I beat it out of myself every chance I get, and I think I've done enough of it now so that I don't feel the temptation anymore. I do think that there are people who put themselves down, and that is not a sign of people who are happy. I do know that, however, that self-deprecating humor is, in my opinion, a sign of real confidence. It's a sign of, I think self-deprecating humor, especially about something you're a little tender about, is a sign. If you're doing it, if you're whipping yourself, then you're just punishing yourself. But if you can really pull it off, it's because you're aware that this is a weakness or a flaw in your character or whatever the case may be, and you're aware that it's a button issue for you, and you're going to push the button anyway, because you know that the button no longer has command over you, that you command the button, and that's how it works. Great example was a couple days ago, I guess it was on the Backstage show, or one of the shows we were doing, and we were talking about how it used to be with studios controlling everything. You had millions and millions of dollars, and now with the internet, it's essentially an infinitely flat, infinitely wide playing field, where the people, where talent really rises, which certainly explains our low numbers in pretty much all the videos that we do. And that kind of self-deprecating joke is the kind of joke I can make. I'm not happy about the numbers. I look at, Paul Joseph Watson, he'll post a video and he'll have 700,000 views in a day. And he's earned them. No, don't get me wrong. So I am a little, not a little. I'm concerned about, and I'm a little upset about the lack of traction that we're getting to some degree. But also the fact that I can joke about it, and do constantly, especially on the Backstage show with Stephen Scott, is an indication that while I'm not happy about the numbers, I can joke about the numbers because I know that the content is there. In other words, I can say that audiences get their views based on talent, which is why my shows do so badly. And I can make that joke because it's funny. And at the same time, I can make that joke because I know that the content I'm doing is actually, it's good. It's just not being seen. So anybody who can make self-deprecating remarks, to me, is a sign of real confidence. And I think the classic example in terms of politics, too, classic examples in terms of politics was one of them when Reagan was running in '84, and he said Mondale was saying that he's too old, that he's senile, and Reagan just went into the debate and said, listen, people have been talking about people's ages as if it was something that influenced the decisions of the American people, and I just want to come out right now and say that I will not hold my opponent's youth and inexperience against him in this campaign. And that was the end of the age argument. It just done, over. But you had to have confidence to make a comment like that. Joe Biden gets out there and says, now, some people have been talking about me forgetting things, but don't you worry, folks, I'm not going nuts. That's not the same thing as a guy who basically says, I'm not going to let my opponent's youth and inexperience, be used against him in this. That was great. And the other one I remember, just anecdotally, was I don't remember where Kennedy said this, John Kennedy, President Kennedy. And there was a lot of talk about voter fraud, and there seems to be pretty good evidence that there was voter fraud. In fact, you could probably find a case to make that there was enough voter fraud to cost Nixon the election, and then Nixon knew it and didn't fight it because he thought it'd be bad for the country. But Kennedy once was talking about this. He was well aware of the fact that people were, murmuring or not murmuring, maybe shouting about the fact that his father bought the election, rigged the election. And he made a remark about something. He said he talked to his dad after the election, and his father was furious. He said, listen, I bought you the presidency. I didn't say I was going to pay for a landslide. And the fact that he can make that joke I just admire it. I admire it very much. I think it's the ultimate form of confidence and also knowing yourself, because you have to know yourself well enough to be able to make the joke, and then you have to know yourself well enough to know where the boundaries of that joke should be. I think I'm going to do one more. It's mostly because the lights are bothering me. A lot of light in my eyes tonight. All right, well, there's only 3 to go, so I might as well take them. Steve Young, Brexit Britannia, would you like to do a little video chat with Nigel Farage? I have not ever interviewed Nigel, but I've been at a few events with him. I sat next to him at a dinner up in Canada once, and I actually was one of the very few times when I was actually embarrassed of myself, because I was just trying too hard to be funny in that particular case. And it really diminished... it just diminished me. I was at an event in Canada several years ago. He was there at the table, and I was just trying too hard to make a good impression. And after I was over, I just realized, don't do that again. That wasn't good. It wasn't just wit. It was just a question of, you went in trying to this set of jokes, and don't do it. But it looks like it's done. Looks like it's signed. And I have to tell you, I don't know much about the Comey thing that dropped yesterday or today. But I have to say, when the Attorney General says that he's committed all of these egregious offenses and we've decided not to prosecute, in this case, I am deeply hoping and somewhat convinced that they're not going to prosecute him for these minor, relatively it's treason, so that's how minor it is. But that Barr's going after the whole shooting match. He's going to drop these charges to get him on conspiracy, treason, something with real good hooks on it. Because I can't imagine that he wouldn't, if he, like I said, I haven't seen the report in such detail, but if he has prosecutable, actionable evidence that would win in court, the fact that he says he's not going to take it to court is telling me he's going after bigger fish. I hope so. I hear people saying that, but I've heard people say that for a long time. I won't believe it until I see it. If I ever see these people perp walk, I will have confidence in the country. And if they're not, if Hillary and Comey and Strzok and all the rest of them, if they walk away with this, then I just won't. I will no longer have confidence in the rule of law. People saying, "How can treason be minor?" I was being arch there. That's the term for that. It's being arch. It's kind of an irony that's very dry. Anyway, yeah, I'd love to do that. Last 2 from David Crean. One of them is, would you ever consider doing an AMA, Ask Me Anything interview on Reddit? I'd never thought about it before, but I'd be happy to do it. I don't think there's anything I've ever been really afraid to talk about. So if that's something you can set up or want to set up, or I haven't any idea how it happens, but I'd certainly be happy to do it. And then finally, also from David Crean, sorry, David. Is there a fellow conservative you would like to debate, and if so, what topic would it be? Also, is there a dream debate that you would like to see someday, either conservative versus conservative or conservative versus liberal? The first thing, needless to say, that flew into my head would be the Apollo debate, but I don't see any point in that. It's not about politics. I already answered the other question, Eric. And so, I'll tell you one debate I would like to have, and that would be a debate with Dave Rubin. Though I think it certainly I consider him a conservative. And I would like to have a debate with Dave Rubin because Rubin has differing opinions about how to get to the same place that I think we want to go to. And I would like to debate him, not to shut him down. I'd like to debate him because I'd like to see if it'd be possible to hammer out a treaty acceptable to both parties. He's going to have a more liberal outlook on things, and his readers and viewers feel the same way. And I said on his show when I was interviewed by him that I bet we could take me and 10 of my followers and you and 10 of your followers, go into a room and bring in some sandwiches, and we could have this whole thing worked out. We'd have a political party, get 85% of the vote. We'd do it in 2 hours, no problem. And I think that would be fun just in terms of actual education. I think in terms of debating somebody on the other side, I certainly, people have said, would you do the Mars show? I said, I don't think I will. And the reason I wouldn't do the Mars show is not because I don't think I could handle Bill Maher. I wouldn't do the Bill Maher show because social proof is so rigged against you there. And what I mean by that is if you get on the Bill Maher show, you're never going to get a sentence out where it's not only replied to by Bill Maher to cheers of the audience, but also by everybody else on the panel. Cannot imagine them sitting in the stunned silence, But if you ask me whether I would debate Bill Maher in a non-studio audience or anybody, absolutely I would. And even if you said, hey, 50-50, I'd take that bet any time. I just think that going on the Bill Maher show is just, you're put at such a disadvantage, especially in the editing room. I was an editor. I was a TV editor for a long time. And I'm just not willing to do it. I know how much you can change the spin on things not because I've done it, but because I've had opportunities to do it, and I've turned those opportunities down out of some sense of professionalism. I could have cut Michael Moore to say any damn thing I wanted to, but I had to give it the best cut for content because that was my job, and I put principles above politics. If I didn't want to be an editor on that show, then I should have hired somebody else to do it. But yeah, Eric's talking about the audience. It's the audience, Was it Hitchens who was on that show, or one of the earlier on Politically Incorrect, where I think it was Hitchens who said, "You're not a comedian, Bill." And he said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You're not a comedian. This isn't comedy. This isn't even opinion. This is kind of a circus." So what do you mean? And Hitchens turns to the audience. If it was Hitchens, somebody said this apparently. Turned to the audience and says, "George Bush sucks." And everybody goes, "Yeah." And he said, "Ta-da. That's just a conditioned reflex. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter whether it's clever. It doesn't matter whether it's right. If it's the kind of things that they want to hear, that's the reaction you're going to get. And the people that are here are people that want to hear what you have to say, which is that we are smarter than everybody else and better too. And there's no arguing with those people because they're the exact opposite of self-deprecating. They're people who have something to prove. This whole Island 120 thing I talk about, I really believe in it. It's just people with slightly above average IQs, 105, 106, 112, something like that. They all want to be seen as smart, and the people they know that are smart talk about the same things, and so I call that Island 120, and we all know what happens on Island 120. You know, Trump is a monster and a mass murderer. The climate is about to collapse. Christians are a bunch of, hayseeds, killers, or whatever the case may be, and we all know what the narrative is, and everybody agrees with it because that's what everybody else agrees with, and so we're all agreeing with each other, so we can all put ourselves on Island 120, when in fact we're probably 105, 107, smarter than the average bear perhaps, but not as smart as we think we are. Let me rephrase that. Not as smart as we would like to be, and so we'll do everything we can to convince people that we're smarter than we are. And the way to convince people that we're smarter than we are is to agree with everything that people who look smart to you say. And that drives the whole thing is driven like that. But when you get past Island 120, when 120 is in the rearview mirror, now I need a telescope to see it up in front of me, but there are people like Thomas Sowell and so on who are way past it. They don't feel the need to have to impress people because they know they're intelligent. They know enough about their own intelligence that they don't have to prove to other people how intelligent they are. They just start considering issues. And when you see, like, somebody, just as an example, like Thomas Sowell or Victor Davis Hanson, just take apart somebody for these, Island 120 arguments, you realize everybody wants to be on that island because none of them feel like they're smart enough to be on the island. That's why it's an echo chamber. Jeremy Porg pointed out something to me once. He said, it's weird about intelligence like that in terms of your self-esteem and so on. He said, you're almost never, may not be happy about it, but you almost never unwilling to admit, hey, that guy's taller than me, or that guy's better looking than me, or that guy's in better shape than me, or whatever. But he says, but you never hear anybody say that guy's more intelligent than me. Nobody ever puts that on the block. And I think that's really onto something. I've been the smartest guy in a room, and I've been the dumbest guy in a room. Second one was a little bit smaller room, but nevertheless. And I much prefer being the dumbest guy in the room. And much prefer. And I've had that experience many times. It's just better. It's better to be constantly being able to learn things, see things, have insights and stuff than just, holding court and having people, just look, oh, well, that's really incredible. No, I'm not interested in that. And I don't mean to make this into a complaint. It's not. But I know that a lot of times during, the Star Citizen stuff that we do, a lot of Strata Loungers here are also in the game. And we all hang out afterwards sometimes, and many of us have had great adventures, and we're going to have a lot of other great adventures. And there's been one or two exceptions, but most of the time that the topic turns to politics, I'm out of there. Not because it offends me, and not because I think anybody's treading on my toes or anything, and not because I think they're even pumping me for information. They're just having a discussion. We're on Discord, and got time to kill or whatever. But when it starts talking politics and Star Citizen, I just pretty much get out, because it just comes a point where it's my day job. You know what I mean? I don't want to fix furniture at nighttime if that's what I do during the daytime, so it's important to get some distance, and God knows that game does it for me. It just. It's not just the game. I can't put my finger on it, but I'll close with this. I can tell you elements of it. When I got married, I lost the desire to fly the airplane. I really did. I didn't just mask it. It's not like I did it for Natasha. I just lost the desire to go flying in this little airplane. And I look back on some of the things that I did, and I thought, how could you possibly take a risk like that? And it's like, well, I have something to live for now, apparently. But what I find is that, and I'm just going to throw this out there because I don't know what it is. So I just have to get into a little tiny bit of the detail so you understand what I'm trying to say here. So in Star Citizen, there's a toggle switch you can throw to make the vehicles behave as they would behave in space. It's called decoupled mode, and basically now it's just a mass on a vector, and you've got 6 degrees of rotation. You pitch up and down, yaw left and right, roll clockwise and counterclockwise, displace up and down, displace left and right, and displace forward and backwards. And I've got one stick to do one thing, and I've got the other stick to do the other thing. And in this game, you get cleared to landing pads, you get cleared to space stations, you get cleared to these rest stops and so on. And when I make the call for clearance in this game, and I just get a computer voice come back, and I kick that thing into decoupled mode, and the landing pad is like maybe on the other side of the structure, and it's it looks like about that big. It's got a little wrench on it, a little blue box where kind of your flight path, your final descent is. And I look at that little box over there, and then something important, but something that I don't really understand happens to my brain. Doing that math in my head without doing the math, just the vectors, and just watching the velocity vector, which is a prediction of where you're going to be. Just being able to finesse that and just make the whole thing just one giant smooth arc, not eek, just one giant smooth arc. It's the same feeling I got when I would practice landings in powered planes, and virtually every landing I ever made in a powered plane, if I could get it, and I couldn't always get it, I'd always ask for a close approach. I'd always request a close approach, and they'd either grant it to me or not, depending on the airspace. But most guys, when they land, they go downwind, a couple miles, make a right, make another right, and they got a mile or two to get themselves on the glide path and so on. And I would just chop the engine on the downwind. I just cut the engine. I just idled it. And then everything after that was just energy management, was just, okay, how far do you have to go in order to get down on the runway? But at which point will you be so far out that you won't be able to get down on the runway? And it's better to err on the short side than the long side. And it's hard to describe, but it's just an endorphin rush for me. I just love it. And when you do it just right, and the thing just comes down, and sometimes you can pop to an external view, and the vehicle you're in just goes, and it's got its landing gear, and it just goes, and the shock absorbers come back a little bit. I don't know. The only reason I'm talking about this is because there's something so therapeutic about that for me. I mean, really, it just relaxes me and gives me that vitamin F. I don't know what it is, but I do know that I would really be missing the flying if it weren't for the virtual flying. And I am giving some thought to seeing how we do with this next show for Daily Wire, and maybe after that's done, I might invest in a decent virtual reality headset. I would fly again, but in order for me to fly again, I would have to be in an airplane with a power plant that is considerably more reliable than a Lycoming engine. And Lycoming engines or Continentals are very reliable engines. I don't know why I've had 3 of them, but I have, and I'm not flying again, I don't think, unless I'm in a jet or an electrically powered vehicle, something that has essentially 0 chance of failing. Trevor says, get a plane with a parachute. I'm kind of over worrying about parachutes at this point. Yeah, I'll take the new trainer for the Air Force, though. That's cool. All right, I guess that'll do it. Thanks very much for joining us. Trevor says the Cirrus. The Cirrus is a very fast, very smooth private airplane, 4-seater, fixed gear, I think, and has the emergency parachute, which has saved a lot of planes. If you get in trouble, just pull this lever, foomp, out goes the parachute, and the whole thing comes down on one nice little piece. But it's not so much the landing as the, holy crap, I got to pull the red lever kind of thing. And somebody, and Leola says, yeah, there is a F-16 for sale somewhere in Florida. And as far as the 10-parter is concerned, it's due out in the beginning of the second week of November is when the due date is, I think. So I got a lot of writing to do, a lot. And that's one of the reasons why we've been short on the firewalls. I've just got to get this done, and there it is. Anyway, that'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge, made possible by the paying members at BillWhittle.com, to whom we are eternally grateful, and for whom we never lose our appreciation. So thank you for parting with some of your hard-earned money to keep this place going and keep us going. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we might do movie night next week. That might be a possibility. Why not? Okay, so until then, thanks again for being here, and hello to all of our friends on YouTube. Yeah, I mean it. And till then, we will see you next week.